أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من اللعين الغوي الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الميامين المهديين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، له دعوة الحق والذين يدعون من دونه لا يستجيبون لهم بشيء إلا كباسط كفيه إلى الماء ليبلغ فاه وما هو ببالغه وما دعاء الكافرين إلا في ضلال. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. I wanted to begin with a story, a narration of a scholar who went for ziyarah to Karbala. Since these are the ayam of remembering Imam Hussein, of course, so it's not connected to the subject per se. Well, it is in a sense, it is. But it's such a beautiful story, I wanted to relate it to you. One of the ulama by the name of Sheikh Ali Akbar Tabrizi says that he went for ziyarah. He writes in his memoirs, contemporary scholar, he writes in his memoirs that he went for ziyarah, to the ziyarah of Hussein ibn Ali, salamullahi alayhi, and he was sitting by the dhari of the Imam, under the holy dome in Karbala. And he saw a man who came up to the dhari, and he was speaking to the Imam in Turkish. And he says, I was trying to understand what this man is saying in Turkish. And he goes on to say basically that from what I gathered, from what the man was relating, that he says, "Oh Imam, I've come to you. I had come with my friends." So he had traveled from Turkey to Karbala for the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. He says, but now I have lost all of my money, everything. فَأْتِنِي ثَلَاثَ دَنَانِيرِ. So, oh Imam, give me 3 dinars, meaning be my intercessor to Allah so that all I need is 3 dinars, dananir. So all I need. Sheikh Tabrizi says, I'm listening to him and I'm just confused, I'm surprised. قلت في نفسي ما هذا؟ كيف يتحدث مع الإمام بهذه الصورة? How does he just speak to Imam in this way? Oh Imam, this is my situation, I need these 3 dinars. He says then, the man got up and just walked out. And he says, I followed him because I wanted to see where is he going. So I followed him. And I saw from a distance, رَأَيْتُ عَيْنَيْهِ تُفَادَانْ مِنْ دُمُوعٍ, or rather he says that I saw from a distance, he interacted, he met a woman and then he moved on from her. And he says, I finally caught up to him. He must have left the sahan, right, the courtyard. He says, I finally caught up to him. And I asked him, what's your deal? What's your story? Where are you from? The sheikh was so interested in who this man is. Speaking to the Imam as if he's speaking to a friend, like just directly. And imagine, and the alim must have so much learning from the seminary, so on and so forth. But there was something unique in the simplicity of this man, in the simplicity of his relationship with Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi. He says, so then I asked the man, and I saw that the man had tears in his eyes. And I asked him, I said, what's your story? And he says, I've come here to Karbala, I lost my money, I have no way to return. He says, then ask your friends, ask someone for help. He says, no, I asked Imam. He's thinking to himself, is this something wrong with this guy? Like, what do you mean he's asking Imam? Like, go ask someone for help. Well, I'll give you money. He says, no, I don't want your money. So he says, so what happened then? You met this woman. He says, yeah, you know, this lady comes up to me and this lady comes up to me, I'm reading the story here, and she offers me 3 dinars. إِنَّمَا أُرِيدُهَا مِنَ الْحُسَيْنِ. He says, no, I want it from Hussein. She told him, take it from me. إِنِّي أُمُّهُ فَاطِمَةٌ. Take it from me because I am his mother Fatima. Salamullahi alayha. Because the riwayah states that those who come to Hussein with the haja, that haja is completed by Fatima Zahra. Salamullahi alayha. He says, he says, I don't want the money, I want it from Hussein. She said to him, عندما قالت أن أمه فاطمة قلت لها يا سيدتي. He says to her, but why do you look so old and battered? He says, we read in the riwayat that you died so young. Of course, this is occurring in the unseen world, in the realm of the manam and things like that. I'm only relating this to you because this is what a sheikh has related about his experience. Allahu alam, these things occur in the ghaibiyat, in the unseen world. You know, when we enter the shrine of Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, it is as if we're entering, as if we're leaving the bound of space and time. And it is within that realm that all kinds of ajaib and ghaibiyat and unseen things occur. This is very normal. This is the metaphysical world. When we are initiated into the love of Hussein ibn Ali, under the dome of Hussein ibn Ali, then this is the world of initiation, the world of unseen things. And he turns to Fatima Zahra and he asks her, he says, why do you look the way you do? And she says to him, take the money, for my ribs were broken. And that was the answer as to why she appeared the way she did to him. So for those who have a haja, or a need, or a hope, we ask through Imam and Hussein alayhi salam, but ultimately the wasila, the one that is most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is of course the Prophet and the mother of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And she inshallah will ensure that our hajat are maqdiyah, they are completed. This is not a small thing, right? And this brings me back to the topic that I've chosen for today, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ra'd, ayah 14, lahu da'watul haq. That to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs the true prayer. Lahu da'watul haq. Let us just meditate on this for one moment here. Lahu da'watul haq. It's a decisive and complete statement that to God belongs the true and real prayer, that everything else is false outside of this. Everything outside of Allah is batil. Lahu da'watul haq. That every prayer, every call, and every cry belongs to Him. And if it's not for Him and to Him, then it is batil. It's not. It is invalid. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say something so amazing. He says, and those who call upon other than God, they will, one, not be answered. لا يستجيبون لهم شيء بشيء. They will not receive any answer. Number one. Number two, إلا كباسط كفيه للماء. it'll be as if they've put their hand out to water, but it is a mirage. There's no water in front of them. That their life is a mirage, their life is a delusion, their life is a self-imposed illusion. Their life is a grand fairy tale. This is what Allah says. وَمَا دُعَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ. And the supplication of those who deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or their hopes, what they seek, their petitions will never go answered. إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ. It is an ontological reality, a necessity of existence. Lahu da'watul haq. Now imagine this. I had written some thoughts. I don't always do this, but today I had written some thoughts before I came here, contemplating over this single word, lahu da'watul haq. And in here is hope for us as Muslims. Because we are, from this verse, lahu da'watul haq, we are ahlul du'a, ahlul haq. The Muslim ummah has been blessed to not be from the second part of this verse, but the first part, lahu da'watul haq. Do you know what one of the main things that scholars say differentiates Muslims from everyone else? Scholars of anthropology, sociology, political science, religious studies, philosophy, you name it. There's many things, but there's one overarching concept that differentiates Muslims from everyone else in this postmodern, post-moral, post-Christian, moral nihilistic society. And that is their attention to prayer. They pray at work, they pray on the road, they pray in the back of a gas station, they build mosques. And mosque attendance and Jummah attendance and masajid attendance, in comparison to other religious traditions, is exponentially higher. The statistics tell us this as well. Exponentially higher. This is a hope. This is something to be proud of as Muslims. That we will never give up this attachment to prayer. Lahu da'watul haq. Our prayer, inshallah, is a prayer of reality, not a prayer of khayal and waham, of just the figment of our imagination. It is based on a tradition which came when there were two empires fighting, the Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Empire. We'll give a little short history lesson for the Mu'mineen today. There were two empires that predated Islam. One was the Byzantine in the west and the Sasanians in the east. Where were the Muslims? They're in the middle, known as Hijaz, Arabia. You have what is known as the two eyes of the world at the time, right? The Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Iranian Empire. Byzantine and the Iranian Empire. Islam comes onto the scene. The Prophet is born in the year 570. The Quran is revealed over 23 years. What happens? The barrier that was in between the east and the western poles of the world at that time came down. Islam facilitated a global dialogue that has never been witnessed in human history. A global civilization which united both east and west under the flag of La ilaha illallah. This is the accomplishment of Islam. And then everyone that belonged to this new religion belonged to the Ummah of Islam. Ummatun Muslimah. Islam created a kind of human cosmopolitanism that was once again never seen before in human history. These are not my words. Read Marshall Hartson, Hugh Kennedy, Todd Lawson. and others. This is a historical fact. Islam created through the Quran and the prophethood of Rasulullah a dialogue of civilizations that never existed before on earth, such that if you would travel from Baghdad to Damascus to North Africa to Alexandria to Cairo to Khorasan to Nishapur, you would find yourself immersed in some of the most advanced philosophical and material sciences on the planet. Muslims invested themselves from the very early days in developing the human mind and the soul. In fact, they didn't see any distinction between mind and soul. This is a false distinction. This is a Cartesian distinction. If I was to say this is a satanic distinction almost, the separation of mind and soul. And this is actually what makes modern psychiatry so problematic in many ways, because it rests so far outside the framework of the metaphysics of Islam. But now imagine, from Spain to the Hindu Kush Mountains, you could travel from Granada to the Hindu Kush Mountains, and it is as if you are in the same country. How is that possible? That a single language would unite the Hindu Kush Mountains to Granada, which is Arabic. A single prayer would unite these people. A single da'wah, lahu da'watul haq. This true prayer would unite an entire civilization. That very civilization that when Charlemagne was scratching his name on a rock in Quebec or wherever he was going to conquer, Muslims were discovering the pathways of the circulatory system. But all of this was done under what? Under the notion and the belief that everything comes from God, is governed by God, and ultimately the responsibility is before God himself. And there is no distinction between mind and soul. It is one organic composition, one being, one wujud. There's no distinction between the two. Think with my mind, feel with my heart. No, it is one concept. The human being is one unified being, not a being made up of different parts and sections. That one part is treated and the other part is left. And this is the problem with society, when we only treat one part of the human being and we do not understand the other part of the human being. We are only seeing a fraction of the picture of the world, a very small fraction of the world, a very small fraction of existence. Colors, groups, languages, people, tribes. All of it united under Islam. Truly, Islam was a culture tour de force. This is a historical fact. This is not me trying to tout the horn of Islam. This is a historical fact. Like I said, from the Balkans to the Asian steppes, to the Iranian plateau, to the Fertile Crescent, to the Red Sea, to the Hindu Kush Mountains, to the Sahara Desert, they were united under one prayer, lahu da'wat al-haq. Should we not be proud to be Muslims? That we belong under the flag of La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah, and as followers of Ahlul Bayt, Aliun Waliullah, which is an added benefit, of course, a necessary aspect, because that's what qualifies La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. The very fact that you still belong to this ummah is a hope for your future. But are we proud of belonging to this ummah? Or are we embarrassed, shy, apologetic, sorry, shying away from the truth? Islam came and brought a vision of humanity that was never before imagined. Never before imagined in human civilization. Alastu bi rabbikum qalu bala. That all of humankind, min al-awwaleen lil-akhirin, from the first ones to the last ones, were gathered in front of God. And they were asked, in that other world, am I not your Lord? As the Quran tells us, qalu bala, absolutely we are. So each and every one of us as human beings, regardless of our religion, regardless of our race, of our identity, are united under that one. Except some of us have forgotten it, some of us have remembered it. That's the difference. It's a matter of being between remembrance and forgetfulness or heedlessness. بين الغفلة والذكر. That's the difference between us as human beings. So Muslims should be that torchbearer to humanity, reminding them of their duty before God, reminding them of their duties before the one who has given them existence, reminding them that no true civilization can be built upon an edifice which is not ultimately derived and responsible to the one who has given them existence. How can a civilization then be built upon a basis other than that? How? In fact, I would believe that Jabir ibn Hayyan, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, Al-Ghazali, of course A'immat Tahirin, that's a given. All these scientists and philosophers of Islam who we study their life. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. And on and on. From whatever school of thought, whether it be Mu'tazili, whether it be Ash'ari, whether it be Maturidi, whether it be Imami, whether it be Zaydi. Every single one of them would roll in their grave today to say that you can build a truly fruitful and blossoming civilization without the premise of La ilaha illallah. They would be rolling in their grave. In fact, Aquinas would be rolling in his grave. Augustine would be rolling in his grave. Origen would be rolling in his grave. Meister Eckhart would be rolling in his grave. They would be livid. What a monstrosity. What an affront to humanity. What a genocide of religion almost. And then the fact that some people would claim to be Muslim or Christian and not even realize that certain elements of their life or the priorities of their life or the decisions that they make in their life, whether it be their marriage or the way they choose to raise their children or the jobs that they choose or the way they choose to earn their income, so on and so forth, is completely and utterly divorced or even partially divorced, at least intellectually, from that reality. Yes, in our daily life, our life is a work in progress. We all make mistakes. We're all a work in progress. We're all broken, hoping to be mended and fixed by the loving hand of God. There is no doubt about this. But the fact that, as Hussein Nasr says himself in the introduction to his work on knowledge, I highly suggest mu'mineen look at this book. He talks about what is knowledge, what is the intellect. In the introduction to this book, Nasr says something extremely important that I think every person should take heed of here. Hussein Nasr says what? He says the fact that tradition even needs to be defined tells us how far we are from the reality. It's like a fish turning to the mother fish, the baby fish turning to the mother fish and asking the mother fish, what's it like? What's water like? You're living in the water. The sunnah, the tradition is your water, is our oxygen. It's like saying, where is the oxygen? It's like something that is so self-intuitive, so self-evident, at least it was, in a traditional civilization, in a traditional world that operated upon the premise that there is a God and we are responsible towards that God. And we have to live our life in a very specific way, with specific rules, with a specific way of thought, with a specific thinking, with a specific form of behavior in all of this in order to honor the fact that God has given us existence in this world. There is no difference between a Muslim or a Christian in this regard, or a Jew, or I may even say a Hindu even. Certain aspects of Hinduism, not all of it, the more of the mystical, philosophical side of it. Yet today, we're just happy if the word God is mentioned. So my point is, human flourishing, the very concept of human development, and we're going to continue this tomorrow and the day after that. There are two visions of what human development means, human flourishing. This is a very important book. I was showing it to Doctor today, A Secular Age by Charles Taylor. I don't expect you all to read it. It's about 830 pages. Published by Harvard University Press. It was the winner of the 2007 Templeton Prize, which is one of the most important prizes in religious studies that could be won. It's a very prestigious prize written by a very important professor, Charles Taylor. In this book, Taylor investigates, basically he asks a question. He says, from the year 1500 to 2000, how did it not only become possible to not believe in God, but the very belief in God or a life shaped by God became a rarity? Or in some cases, a very embattled option to begin with. How did 500 years in Europe and America change? What happened in this 500 years? And again, I will confess that I think the vast majority of Muslims who came here had no idea what secularism was. I think they came in search for economic opportunities from the global south, right? Whether it be from Africa or India or other parts of Asia. Innocently, perhaps, naively, perhaps, not realizing the world that they were stepping into, a world that is utterly divorced from a meaningful God. This is Taylor's words, not mine. Charles Taylor, the eminent professor at Harvard University of philosophy. Taylor says something so interesting. He says here that every person and every society lives with or by some conception of what human flourishing is. What does it mean to live a fulfilling life? A life filled with joy. A life that at the end of the day you could say, I lived a fulfilling life. I lived a happy life. I lived a full life. I don't think any person in this room does not want to live a full life, a fulfilling life. What makes life really worth living? What would we most admire people for? We can't help asking these and related questions in our lives, and our struggles to answer them define the view or views that we try to live by. And he goes on to say that I'm talking about an age, he says here. He says that I'm talking about an age when self-sufficing humanism becomes a widely available option, which it never was in the ancient world, where only a small minority of the elite, which was itself a minority, espoused it. Basically, a kind of human flourishing that removes God from the picture altogether. He says, this is remarkable. Because human civilization up to the 50s, let us say, so this has only been 50 or 60 years in the making, so let's talk about, what, 3,000, 4,000 years. It's only been 50 years into this new experiment, 60 years. You know that, right? I mean, this new experimental life is only 50 years old. In the grand scheme of human civilization, it's a very short period of time. We're really the guinea pigs of this new, I don't know what it is really, this empty vessel of something called civilization. It's only 50 or 60 years, this experiment, after the Second World War. But my point is that what Taylor says, very interestingly, is that for the very first time in human history, an entire society is governed around living a fulfilling life minus religion. And the fact that for some people in this room, this may not cause any shivers in their skin just shows how far they've already drunk that Kool-Aid. The fact that this may not even perturb you is in itself a demonstration that many of us are consumers of that very ideology already. That many of our hearts are already polluted by it. And this is what Taylor says. How did they achieve this within 50 or 60 years? Like how? What did they do to achieve this? The powers that be in the North Atlantic and the Western Hemisphere. Or the West in general. How? And he takes 830 pages to answer that single question, of course. But inshallah, we're not from that statistic because we are here to remember Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Muslim bin Aqil. Again, these stories are meant to awaken our spiritual consciousness, right? Because we're talking about people that live not only for social values, but religious values that were much higher than themselves, right? Muslim bin Aqil enters Kufa on the 5th of Shawwal. He stays at the house of Mukhtar. Most of you know the story. The problems began to arise when Ibn Ziyad switched the governor to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, right? From Bashir bin Nu'man to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. This is when the problems began in the city of Kufa, especially for Muslim ibn Aqil. Because when he arrived, the people were already anticipating Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. According to Ibn Shahr al-Shub, Muslim had collected 12,000 signatures. 12,000 signatures. Could be more or less, but thousands of signatures of committing to the cause of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He was the guest of Hani ibn Urwa. Eventually, Hani ibn Urwa was found out. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad sent people out to find him. Hani was taken to the palace. Hani says that I swore to protect the son of the Messenger of Allah, and I will be an enemy to whoever he is an enemy. By this time, Muslim had moved to the home of Tu'a, the mother of Ash'ath bin Qais. She graciously allowed Muslim refuge in her home. He continues to struggle. He's betrayed at every corner. Right? Again, the story of betrayal, Muslim Naqil. Assalamu alayka ya Muslim. I just came from his dhari in Kufa. Just arrived last week. And I had tears in my eyes when I thought about the betrayal and the sense of helplessness in the heart of Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim is betrayed. It was too late. He was trapped and ambushed. We're not going to go too much into the story. But we read in the riwayat, the shuja'at of Muslim ibn Aqil was incredible. The riwayat tell us that Bakr bin Humran hit the mouth of Muslim, cutting the upper lip of Muslim ibn Aqil. He hit back Bakr ibn Humran. Muslim was tired, he was beaten. He rested his back against the jidar, against the wall. Imagine the final moments of Muslim ibn Aqil. He killed up to 180 enemies up to this point. And Ibn Ziyad yelled at his troops that this is one man alone. Are you scared of him? This is the Safir of Hussein. Now imagine Abu Abdullah on the battlefield. If this is the strength of Muslim ibn Aqil, then what was the strength of his master Hussein on the day of Ashura? Muslim tells them, what is wrong with you? Do you know why? Shall I narrate to you why? Because they began to pelt him with rocks. They could not fight him one-on-one, just like they would stone Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. But he was not the first one to be stoned. The traditions tell us they began to stone Muslim ibn Aqil in the city of Kufa. So he had rocks falling upon him. They pummeled him with rocks. They began hitting his body, hitting his face. Salamu alayka ya Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim then says, Al-atash qad balagha minni, that thirst is getting to me. Muslim was then stabbed. He fell on the ground. He begins to cry. And Umar bin Ubaidullah bin Abbas turns to him and he says, Limada tabki ya Muslim? Muslim, why are you crying? He says, I am not crying for myself, rather I am crying for Hussein. I'm crying because I am now not able to send this message to Hussein that he has been betrayed in the city of Kufa. But he says that I turn to Allah and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the risk and the benefit for martyrdom at the hands of the most evil person. Ash'ath then began hitting the face of Muslim ibn Aqil. Yes, they tortured Muslim over and over, hitting his face, kicking his face, putting him into the ground. They did not allow Muslim ibn Aqil to die a slow death, right? Before Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Muslim would be the preview of the violence and the barbarity of Banu Umayyah. We read in the riwayat, the Muslim at this point knew it was over. They took him to the top of the castle. Yasbahullah ta'ala wa yastaghfiruhu wa yusalli ala nabi. He began to pray. He began to do istighfar. He began to send salawat upon the Prophet. And then they slaughtered him. And they cut his head off. And then they threw him. Salamullahi alayhi ya Muslim ibn Aqil. Think about this, brothers. They then threw him off the top of the castle in Kufa. They slaughtered him. They threw him off the top of the castle in Kufa. And then Hani ibn Urwa was next. He was then taken to the market to be executed. Do you know what they did to Muslim ibn Aqil? This is in the history. They dragged his body to the closest garbage dump and nailed him to a cross. Or nailed him to wood, rather. So he was already dead after decapitating Muslim ibn Aqil. They disposed of him like garbage. But we know that his master Hussein salamullahi alayhi would not be treated any differently. What happened to Muslim was a preview of what would happen to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But yet his children were not spared any fate, any respite either. He had 2 children. Salamullahi alayhi. You know, this brings me to tears. I was just in the Sardab of Tiflan Muslim. I had the opportunity to go down into the actual Sardab of Awlad Muslim ibn Aqil, of these 2 children in Musayyib. And I began thinking of the musibah of the children of Muslim ibn Aqil, because he had 2 children, Muhammad and Ibrahim. Muhammad was 11, Ibrahim was 9. Salamullahi alayhima. He left 2 children behind. He left them in the care of Shurayh al-Qadi. Shurey comes to the children of Muslim, and he begins to cry. فَقَالَ يَا شُرَيْ مَا هَذَا الْبُكَاء. They turn to Shurey and they say, Shurey, what are these tears that you have in your eyes? فَبَكِيَ بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا. He tells them that their father has now died, and they say, wa ghariba, wa abata, wa ghurbata, wa ghurbata. This is the tears and the screams of these children. He then says, I'll now hand you off to a kafila, because we want to protect you and find a way for these little boys to make it back to Medina. Imagine this tonight if you lost your son or your daughter, 9-year-old child is gone. He hands them over to a kafila. This is according to Wasidatu Darain of Allama Zanjani, one of the great scholars of Najaf. He hands them off to a kafila, which is headed for the city of Medina. As they were chasing after the kafila left at night, and they missed the kafila. They then were caught and taken to prison by Ibn Ziyad. They spent some time in prison. Some say 1 year, some say over 2 years they spent in prison, in jail. And then their jailer's name was Mashkur, who basically was a lover of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Mashkur eventually, after hearing them crying night and day, right? The riwayat said that these two little boys would cry for their father night and day. They're lost, they're estranged, they're alone. They would cry and cry and cry and cry, brothers, until Mashkur felt it in his heart that I have to do something. So he removes them from the prison. At the risk of his own life, he takes them out of prison, smuggles them out of prison, and sends them to the city of Qadisiyah, which is further south, or in a different city, the city of Qadisiyah in Iraq. Again, from prison to prison to prison to prison, we read. This was their life. They would be caught, put in prison, caught, put in prison. One night, Muhammad is sleeping beside his brother Ibrahim. They would sleep together every night, the two boys. He turned to Ibrahim and he says to Ibrahim, I had a dream. SubhanAllah. And he says, I saw myself at my own grave, this 11-year-old boy is saying. And I thought that we were going to be killed soon, and then it was as if I could see Muhammad al-Mustafa, Ali al-Murtada, Fatima Zahra, and Hassan and Hussein salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. That I could see all of them, and then the Prophet comes. Shall I narrate to you what the Prophet says? The Prophet turns to Muslim, to our father, and he says, how did you leave behind these two boys with the enemies of Allah? How did this happen? In fact, it is reported that Ibn Ziyad then informed Yazid about this. And they offered a $10,000 bounty on the heads of the two children of Muslim ibn Aqil. Eventually they were caught. Eventually they were caught. And the riwayah states that a man found them in the middle of the night. They were being hosted by a lady. This is a very long story. And they looked at him and they had tears in their eyes. And he asked them, who are you? Where are you from? They're so innocent that they're just children. They said that we're the sons of Muslim ibn Aqil. So he says, okay, I'll keep you safe. Okay? And it turns out that he collected his $10,000 bounty and beheaded both children. Saduq narrates in his Amali that as the man pulled out his sword, the two children had tears in their eyes. Imagine the tears of a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. That they would not even spare these children. Killed for no fault except the fact that they were from the family of the Prophet, from Ahlul Bayt, from Ali Muhammad. You know, Imam al-Zaman tells us in his Ziyarah Nahiya, and I'll conclude with this. Subya ahluka kal-abid. Ya Hussein. Let us turn to Karbala, to the Kubba of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and we tell him, Subya ahluka kal-abid, that your family were taken like slaves, imprisoned like slaves. Suffidu fil hadid. They were put into iron shackles. فوق الأقطاب المطيات, thrown onto saddleless camels. وأيديهم مغلولة إلى الأعناق, and their hands were chained to their necks. هذه مصيبة الحسين سلام الله عليه. This is the musibah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. These are أيام المحزونة. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين.